Okay, let's do that.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to our October Faculty Council meeting. This month's meeting finds us almost midway through the semester, and I'm not sure whether I would describe us as thriving or surviving, perhaps a little bit of both, depending on the moment. But what I do know is that we're all trying our best, faculty and staff, to readjust to life on campus and to carry on in the midst of the continued uncertainty that we are all living with in so many aspects of life. Today we have a full agenda, and on it is a discussion of our libraries. As someone wrote to me today, the libraries and all they represent are at the heart of any great university. When budget realities encroach on our libraries, it impacts all of us, both psychologically and practically. And I know the choices and plans put in place have not been easy ones to make or design. I'm thankful to Elaine Westbrooks for her dedication to making the very best plans possible and for taking time to talk candidly with us about them. As you know, within faculty governance, we have had some challenges related to honorary degrees and awards. Board of Trustees had made a change, taking all responsibility for distinguished alumni awards and honorary degrees out of the hands of the faculty. Indeed, they chose not to honor many of the faculty choices that were put forward in this year's Distinguished Alumni Awards that will be given on University Day. Together, Jill Moore, our Secretary of the Faculty, and I revisited the decision with the new board chair and vice chair. They were receptive, and at last week's BOT meeting, at least for this academic year, the rules were changed back. There is still work to do on that front to make sure that the Honorary Degrees and Awards Committee and the BOT is on the same page as we begin the nomination process this year. But I am grateful for the chance to communicate productively with Chair Bolick and Vice Chair Pryor on this subject. We have also sent a letter this week inviting the BOT to attend our meetings should they wish to do so. Next, I want to acknowledge the death of a student at UNC Wilmington early this week. A 19-year-old who had decided not to be vaccinated was taken too soon by COVID and its complications. As a mother, I know how difficult it is when adult children make choices that are far too risky. I grieve for him and for his family. To our student leaders, thank you for the work you have done to move our student vaccination rate to the very high student vaccination rate that we've achieved on our campus. We'll be hearing further updates on our campus COVID status today from both the provost and from Dr. Amir Barzan, who has agreed to meet with us. And finally, I wanted to close with a quote. I'm not going to pronounce this well, from Pierre Teilhard de Chardin that I keep on my bulletin board as a reminder during these not quite normal days. We should like to skip the intermediate stages. We are impatient of being on the way to something unknown, something new, and yet it is the law of all progress that it is made by passing through some stages of instability and that it may take a very long time. And with that, I want to turn to our first agenda item, which is to introduce Dr. Leah Cox, who is our Vice Provost for Equity and Inclusion and our Chief Diversity Officer. And I've had the pleasure of meeting with Dr. Cox several times. We have monthly meetings together, and I'm delighted that she'll be taking a few moments to speak to us today, and I hope all of you will have the chance to get to know her. Dr. Cox.
Thank you, Mimi, and thank you for inviting me to speak with the council. It is my pleasure to be here at UNC. I've just been here a short time, but I am coming to love being here on this campus and working with all of you so far. As you know, I'm deeply committed to D&I work, but also committed to the well-being and success of our students, faculty, and staff here at UNC. It's my charge to assist, support, monitor all of our units at the university in their efforts to recruit, retain, and support all of us, and all of those from historically underrepresented groups, hoping to provide a supportive and affirming environment for all of those who are a part of our UNC community. As you well know, the UDI is planning to provide leadership and information, consultation, education, training, and assistance to all of us across the institution, all of our departments, in an effort to help us all embrace diversity, equity, and inclusion, not because we're obligated to do this and not because it's what the law says we have to do, but because we recognize that we'll enrich ourselves and all of our students as we engage in this pursuit in higher education. So in the upcoming year, one, I'm hoping to build my staff. So we know that there's lots to do across the institution, but we're dealing with a sort of bare bones staff right now to be able to engage in all of the work and the programs that need to happen here. We're also going to begin developing a program where we begin to develop and train facilitators to assist with some of these mini dialogues and discussions that are part of our campus and that are going to take place, that are difficult, that are challenging, and sometimes lead to a debate, which is not what we want, but we want to be heard and to be understood. So we're going to also be developing some multiple trainings that departments and units will help us to begin to do a deeper dive after the trainings we understand were received from REI about 1.5 years ago. And then last, as you know, I co-lead Objective 1 on the strategic plan, and we know that there's a lot to do to be built for our community. So I'm excited about the multiple requests that are coming from the members of our community, which shows me that you're engaged and willing to get down and dirty and ready to work and all that we need to do to become a more inclusive community. So I want to thank you for inviting me today, and I am looking forward to meeting all of you in the upcoming days here at UNC. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cox. We're really looking forward to getting to know you better too, and to all that you'll bring to us. So we're very fortunate to have you with us, and welcome. And I think with that, we'll turn it over to the Chancellor. Chancellor?
Great. Thanks, Mimi. And it's great to be with you and my colleagues this afternoon. We're now in week 7 of the fall semester, and I continue to feel optimistic and encouraged by our progress. We continue to hear from so many students, their parents, and many of our faculty about how grateful they are that we're able to be back in person and that our campus has really come alive, and we're allowing our students to thrive in this in-person residential environment. So I just want to take the opportunity to again thank all of our faculty, our staff who are making this possible during these, as Mimi's already said, somewhat uncertain times. So I just want to express my appreciation, and I know I speak on behalf of our deans and the many members of the leadership team. Thank you. I also hope you've taken the opportunity to experience some of Carolina's traditions, which we're seeing come back into the in-person environment on campus. Last Friday was a perfect example. Left the office here in South Building, went down Polk Place, sat in for a while to watch the students' multicultural event that was taking place down in front of Wilson Library. Left there, went over to the women's, to the field hockey game where we celebrated a much needed win for Coach Shelton's team, and then went over to watch some of the volleyball game. So I hope you're taking the opportunity to cheer on our student athletes and to attend as many on-campus events to support our students as you possibly can. And I know that it means a lot to them when we can do that. Just want to appreciate the hard work of everyone again that's making this in-person experience possible. And I continue to be amazed by the resilience of our community. I want to just touch on 4 things before I turn this over to Bob and Dr. Barzin. But I want to say a little bit about our response to COVID-19, our rankings, the current budget process, and what we are doing to support the mental health of our students. First, around COVID-19, again, as Mimi's already indicated, our vaccination rates are high. They are starting to level off, but we're sitting there at about 93% of our students who have attested to being vaccinated, over 94% of our faculty, and over 84% of our staff. And again, this percentage is, while it's leveled off. We certainly saw an increase from the first day of classes up through about 2 weeks ago. We know with the high level of spread in our state, we have to continue to be vigilant and continue to adhere to the COVID-19 community standards. And all indications are that the campus community really has been doing just that. And that's one of the reasons why we're having a successful semester. We know we're going to continue to still see positive cases, but again, the relatively low number of cases that we're seeing on campus is encouraging. The positivity rate is at 0.54%, and that's for asymptomatic positivity rate, and the symptomatic positivity rate is at 3.3%. And again, I think the fact that these rates have remained low, I think it's an indication of that our safety plans are working and everybody's abiding by the plan that we've put in place. But we will continue to evaluate and change those plans as necessary in response to data that we receive from our incredible team of infectious disease public health experts that work with us on a daily basis. Our success, I think, is a testament to the commitment of so many people. I do want to again thank Amir Barzan and Ken Pittman for their teams at the Carolina Together testing program and Campus Health for their tireless work to provide for our community. And I know Dr. Barzan is with us, and I just want to thank him for being here and grateful for all that you do. Second point is just around the recent rankings that came out. Our strength as a university was reflected in the rankings that have come out recently. For the 21st consecutive year, U.S. News and World Report ranked Carolina number 5 among public universities. We climbed to number 10 in overall best value, and we made our top ranking as the best value for public universities for the 17th consecutive year. And then just last week, you may have seen the Wall Street Journal and Times Higher Ed rankings that were released. We remained 3rd among public universities and 33rd overall. And so a university doesn't attain this type of recognition without world-class faculty. And so again, I want to thank you, our faculty. I think the rankings reflect the hard work of certainly of our faculty, but also of the many graduate students that take part in our educational mission that help us to address some of the biggest challenges of our time through their research. And again, our staff who always strive to make certain that we are capable of conducting this incredible work on our campus. And so that excellence, we see it in the classroom, in the research labs, and across our campus through a lot of the service activities that take place. And so I think we should be proud of the rankings, and I want to thank you again. Third point is that we are closely watching the budget process as the General Assembly and the budget process is coming to closure. On Wednesday, you may have seen the House and the Senate announce they had reached an agreement on a budget, and that they were now sharing it with the governor to continue discussions with Governor Cooper. And so we are watching this closely. We remain optimistic that some kind of budget agreement will be reached. And I've worked hard in tandem with the UNC system to advocate for your and our campus's interests. And so we believe that the budget will be strong for UNC, for the system, and for UNC-Chapel Hill. And I certainly hope that it'll include salary increases, funding for salary increases for state employees, and certainly our employees here at UNC-Chapel Hill, to help support campus initiatives such as our READY program that we've talked about, the Rapidly Emerging Antiviral Drug Discovery Initiative, as well as significant investments in our much needed capital projects and R&R, repair and renovation projects. So we hope to know more in the next hopefully 10 to 14 days is what we're hearing. So we're hoping for the best. Finally, we're hearing from many of our students, along with faculty and staff, about the mental health challenges that they're facing, and this is certainly of concern. And we know that the the challenges facing many of our students was already on the rise pre-pandemic. And it's certainly it's been a difficult year and a half, really, and a lot of stress and burnout is a reality for many people. And so, like many universities across the country, we've seen an increase in the need for mental health services. And I couldn't be happier with our team down at CAPS. I've been in 2 meetings this week with some of our counselors and therapists that work at CAPS, which is most of you know, stands for our Counseling and Psychological Services. And these therapists and counselors have nearly doubled the number of counseling appointments this year compared to the past few years. And so we really have to be sure that we're providing every opportunity for our students to have those services. My understanding is that for the first time in quite a while, many years, there are waiting lists. And so we are trying to address that. Student Affairs is in the process of working to hire some additional help and to provide additional programming that will be critical in moving us forward and addressing some of the needs. They're also doing a lot of virtual appointments, which we've heard from students they like that as well. So we're committing an additional about $155,000 of one-time funding to help get us through the next several months to provide increase in the number of counselors that will be available to our students. And so I'm very concerned about the issues surrounding this, and we'll continue to do everything we can to provide for our students. And I just want to encourage our faculty to, as I know most of our faculty do, to show compassion for our students and for each other as we continue to work through these challenging times. So before I turn this over to Bob, I just want to remind folks that we do have October the 12th as University Day, and we'll celebrate our 228th birthday. Our theme this year is resilience, and we'll look at that resilience throughout our 228 years, as well as certainly focusing in on the resilience that we've seen from so many members of our campus community over these past 18 months throughout the pandemic. We'll also highlight the 50th anniversary of the UNC system with President Hans delivering comments about the 50th anniversary of the consolidated UNC system, followed by the awarding of the OMAX Gardner Award to one of our faculty members by the UNC system. So that'll be a fun day. We'll gather at 2 o'clock in Memorial Hall for University Day on October 12th. And then we're also excited to celebrate the class of 2020's commencement just 2 days before that on October the 10th at 1 p.m. with Coach Roy Williams speaking. And I hope that we'll see all of you out at Keenan Stadium for that on October 10th at 1 p.m. and then in Memorial Hall on the 12th. So I'll stop there. Again, thank you for all you're doing, and I'll turn it over to Bob before we take your questions. I think Bob is with us now.
So you wanted to have Bob speak before?
Yeah.
We can do it either way. Mimi, whatever you suggest.
Oh, I don't have a preference.
Bob, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I can jump in, and I'll try to be brief, Mimi. Maybe just to pick up on some of the comments that Kevin made. With respect to COVID, the numbers, on campus, I think, as Kevin mentioned, both in terms of vaccination as well as percent positivity, are very encouraging. We did receive a report this morning from UNC Healthcare, and their numbers were also quite encouraging, both in terms of number of hospitalizations at UNC Healthcare here in Chapel Hill, as well as the number of patients in intensive care units. These numbers have been now modeled, and we are clearly on the downside of that slope. And so this is consistent with the findings across the state and in other hospital systems as well. Orange County Health Department statistics are also very encouraging. I think we're all very fortunate to be both living and working in Orange County. We have some of the best numbers. We do have the best numbers in the state as it relates to percent of the population vaccinated. We're currently hovering right around 80% fully vaccinated and 83% partially vaccinated, which is an incredibly high number. Certainly leads the state, is my understanding, and amongst the top counties in the country. So everyone should be proud of the work that they have been doing across the county area to get our citizenry vaccinated. So a lot of good news with respect to that. We also are encouraging those individuals who are eligible or qualified for boosters to go ahead and get those booster shots. The data out of Israel and other data coming from Pfizer are very supportive of the value of boosters. And right now, the criteria are pretty favorable for our community. Individuals who are immunocompetent, incompetent, individuals over the age of 65, or individuals who have work situations that put them out in front of people, frontline workers. And our interpretation of that is that would include our faculty. And so, again, if you qualify right now, that's available for Pfizer only, unless you're immunocompetent. But we're hoping that information will be forthcoming from Moderna as well. And those who have received that product will be eligible for a boost sometime soon. Also, we started getting flu shots this week. I got mine today, and I would encourage all of you to get your flu shot as well. I know that we're asking a lot of everyone to, get jabs in their arms, but we think it's in the best interest of our community as well as your own personal health and well-being. I do want to just let you know that we continue to support our faculty and our students who have need for international travel. We are still under a restriction from the president's office, but we are approving via an exceptions process for both faculty, staff, and students to travel if, in fact, that travel can be justified. We go through a very, I think, thorough and comprehensive review of each consideration, looking at not only COVID, but in terms of the incidents, but also looking at the conditions within that country or within that city. So I just want to let all of the faculty know that we are trying very hard to maintain the full mission of the university. And I know that many of our faculty, and particularly our graduate students, have unique needs to travel internationally. And wherever possible, we want to try to support them. We've also had some considerable discussion about the academic calendar. The calendar, we certainly planned to have a normal calendar this fall and for the spring of 2022. We've had considerable discussion about that within the roadmap implementation team's deliberations, as well as amongst the deans. And at least as of right now, the plan is to continue to maintain the academic calendar as we've all planned on it. And we'll certainly allow ourselves to be influenced by data if the data would suggest that we need to make adjustments. But as of right now, we are planning on a normal academic calendar. I would like to just follow up on a point that Kevin made, and that is our students, are experiencing an awful lot of pressure, and they are experiencing unprecedented mental health challenges and issues. And I think we've tried in many respects, to, create an environment that will be accommodating to them, but much of that accommodation and consideration needs to take place within the classroom setting as well. And so I would just ask all of the faculty, to be understanding and to be compassionate with our students as our students are trying to navigate with you the challenges and problems and perhaps even personal crises that they might be experiencing still as a result of COVID-19 or perhaps even complicated by the many other things that are going on across the country. So I just ask you to do that, and also as it relates to students' absences, if you also could be responsive and again compassionate as it relates to justified student absences throughout this semester. And with that, Mimi, I'll stop there and open up for questions for Kevin and myself.
Do you want to see what he's doing? They took
Oh,
over
yeah.
my computer.
Whoops, Kelly, I think you're, please mute, Kelly. Thank you. Okay. All right, so we do have time for questions. We're a little ahead of schedule. So if anyone, I'm checking my little panelist list over here. Probably the easiest thing is if folks raise their hands. Deb, did you have a question?
Yes, and you cannot raise your hand unless,
Oh, you did.
okay, I did, thank you. Chancellor Guskowicz and Provost Bluin, thank you for this update. And I wanted to congratulate both of you on a successful, somewhat successful fall semester where not only we have the highest vaccination rates and great rankings for Carolina. And I really appreciate Chancellor Guskowicz's update on the budget. But as you would know, that for about 3 years now, our faculty staff have really heard that whole thing about how we are waiting for the state to approve the budget. And I don't know if I'm correct in my count, for about 3 years now, most faculty and staff hasn't received a legitimate raise, or and you don't have to take my word for it. If you look at the whole if you compare our faculty and staff salaries with our peers, it's very low. So I wanted to see if there is anything our UNC leaders could do to make sure that we are not dependent. And I share with you an example. In 2015, Chancellor Carol Folt, and I remember that because I remember the exact moment where we were in Kerr Hall, where some of us had asked her the question, and she said that she would work out some things in the budget, and she did, so that faculty members and staff got a legitimate increase. But in the last few years, and I think our chair of faculty also mentioned in one of her notes, that we haven't had any raises. And for the last 16 months or 18 months, I think you would agree that our faculty and staff had worked very hard. We have been compassionate with our students and colleagues. But I think we are at a time when our faculty and staff are looking at some kind of compassion in terms of raises and an appreciation in terms of recognizing what we have done.
Deb, yes, I couldn't agree more. The challenge is that we need a recurring funding source in order to provide the salary increases. I will tell you, President Hans has fought very hard over in Raleigh. I've talked with him usually every week, and he has spent a lot of time over in the General Assembly, advocating for salary increases. He's been very consistent in that being a major priority in these budget discussions, so that because this is system-wide, obviously, but in the absence of a recurring funding source, it's hard for us to to guarantee that we're going to provide 4, 5, 6% salary increases when we're just finally at a place, as we said, where by December of this year, certainly by June of 22, we will have balanced our budget, which we have not done since about 2013. And so if we were to, impose an unfunded mandate to the schools and their deans to provide additional salary increases beyond what will come through the General Assembly's ARP, we would be putting ourselves potentially right back into that place that we've been with a structural deficit. So we're going to hope, we're hoping, that we're going to see these increases, not just this year, but those recurring dollars becoming available, hopefully through the General Assembly over the next several years. And we'll be awaiting the guidelines from the system office on how to implement an ARP as soon as the budget's been finalized.
So Chancellor Gaskovich, thank you for answering that question. At a future meeting, not today, could we have a elaborate update on what's went on? I'll tell you, there was one year the budget never passed, as you would recall, and nobody had any raise. You would almost not ask anything. That would be an insulting question. So I think we all are going through that situation where, as you rightly pointed out, you need a recurring, but at least could we expect in a future meeting a solid update that says, look, these are the deficit numbers, and this year we cannot have raises. I mean, we all understand that a lot of things happened in the General Assembly and other places that are out of our control. But I think our campus community would appreciate a good update on that this year we do not have this. And there was, I mean, and you have been part of this, where we all, when we have not heard from anything from our leadership about what is happening with the budget. And then, then you have May and January and everybody forgets about it. So I would really
Deb, let's do that. Let's put that on an agenda for, we did a big budget update in a faculty council meeting last year. We had Nate come and he went through the entire, the entire situation and explained it in great detail. So let's put that on an agenda for a future meeting. There is a note in the chat from Vaughn Upshaw saying, just noting that it is difficult to recruit in these circumstances. So let's go on to Jan.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. I have actually two questions. One of them is very closely related to Deb's, which is I was really excited to hear the high ranking numbers. And I would like to know what is the university doing to explain to the administration, to the legislature, that to run a world-class university truly needs investment, and that needs of a research-run universities are different from like needs of other universities, because I sometimes worry that we get lost in the system-wide discussions. That's the first question. And the second question is, my understanding is that we will have a new provost, and it will be good to know any updates on what is happening with that.
Sure. So your first question, Jan, is that we are always advocating to the General Assembly and to the Board of Governors through the help of our campus leadership here and President Hans. I have hosted in my office many times over the past several months during this budget period, Board of Governors members and General Assembly members, as well as calls, frequent calls to advocate for salary increases, for our growing need for building renovations and repair, and a number of other initiatives. And so we are always advocating for the need to keep Carolina great, to keep us as a top-ranked public university. That comes at an expense. We also have to recognize that $540 million a year, about 16% of our overall operating expenses come from the General Assembly. We are fortunate to be one of the best funded systems in the country, and certainly as the flagship and a major research university, it comes at an even greater expense. So we'll always be advocating. Your second question is around the provost search. And yes, I want to thank the search committee. They've 17-member search committee has done an incredible job. It was a very robust pool of over 60 applicants, working closely with Russell Reynolds, which is the search firm that we're using for this very important appointment. That was narrowed down to 14 candidates about 2.5, 3 weeks ago. And it has since been narrowed down to 6 finalists that will be visiting campus. And this is a confidential search, meaning that which is the way in which over 90% of the provost searches at AAU institutions are conducted, meaning that there will be small stakeholder groups for these one-day interviews with the candidates along with the search committee. And those will be taking place over the next few weeks. And my goal is that we'll identify, hope to name a new provost certainly by the second week of November. And so everything is in place to meet that deadline, with the hope of that individual starting sometime early in the new year. And so that's sort of the update. And I want to thank all of you that served on the search committee and that will be participating in any of these small stakeholder groups that will be held in a private location to maintain the confidentiality of these candidates who are, many of them are, in similar positions at their current institutions. And so I'm confident that we will be able to meet the deadlines that we had set.
Jennifer and then Mark. Jennifer, are you there? We can't hear you. Okay, let's go to Mark, and then maybe we can come back to Jennifer.
Sure. Thanks, Mimi. This is more just a statement, but I just wanted to say that I know there's a long way to go, but I wanted to thank the UNC leadership team and our university's health team for enabling our students to be back in the classroom and experience campus life this fall while keeping infections to a minimum, and for enabling me to be back. So it's been really good to be back in person. So I just wanted to say, I know it's been difficult for you, but just happy to be back. So thanks.
Thanks, Mark.
And Jennifer, assuming maybe your question was answered or that you're no longer with us. Okay, any further questions before we move on? All right. Well, thank you, Chancellor, and thank you, Provost Bluen. We will move to Dr. Barzan, who wants to talk with us a little bit about testing, I think.
Thank you, Mimi. And I apologize for having my video off. My internet reception isn't great where I'm at, so I'm trying to make it through this meeting without losing y'all. So thank you for that. Mark, thank you so much for your comments. And I believe Helena is going to put up some slides that we're just going to kind of work through. Wanted to give a chance here at this meeting to kind of just bring everyone up to speed and to give just a recap and a review of what we've got going on in the testing program. So as soon as the slides come up, I will be happy to go through them.
Okay.
There we go. Perfect. So I wanted to put together just a few slides from common questions that I've received from faculty, staff, employees, and other members of our Carolina community. I also wanted to share that the information that I've gathered and put together here and assembled is either available on the Carolina Together website or is available through the North Carolina DHHS website. I think they're two really valuable websites to have available, but wanted to assimilate the information in a way that hopefully gives a clearer picture in just a short amount of time and a few slides of where we have gone from at the beginning of the semester to where we are now. So we're going to go to the next slide here. This first slide is just a really cheap and poorly put together Excel graph that I did just to show where we have gone over the past few weeks of being together here on campus. So The top number that you see is the highest number is the total number of tests that we have done during that weekly basis. There's bars that are there that just show the difference between the students and employee testing as well. As you can see, the vast majority of testing that we have done on campus to date has been in our students. And that's important because as we'll talk about in a couple of slides, our faculty and staff will start testing in the program starting on Monday if they have not attested to being vaccinated. And just a few points to highlight here, very consistent with what we had seen in terms of our additional planning and modeling that we had done, is that first few weeks of being back on campus would have likely brought in our larger surge of infections. And so if you look at the time period around that week of August 23rd through 29th, that was our highest positivity rate on campus with our testing through the Carolina Together testing program at 2.4%. One thing to be able to also, I think is important to make sure that we know, we are having asymptomatic students. As long as you're asymptomatic, you can come through the Carolina Together testing program to test. We do not encourage symptomatic students to test at the Carolina Together testing site at the Union, and that should be done at the campus health location. But as you have seen over the past 4 weeks, and most notably starting that week of September 13th through the 19th, we've nadered down to a 0.34% positivity. I wanted to make sure that everyone saw that this is the data that's been complete to date through the whole last week of testing. I did put in there the testing that we have done as of this morning at 6 a.m. Through the Carolina Together testing program. So sticking around that consistent rate of around 0.3 to 0.4% positivity rate is still showing up through all the tests that we processed as of yesterday. We can go to the next slide. Again, just wanted to make sure that people knew that this information is readily available and accessible on our Carolina Together dashboard, our COVID-19 tracking dashboard. What you'll see up there that I think has been a nice addition is the vaccination rate. So if you're ever wondering what that vaccination rate is for either our faculty, staff, employees, or our students, it's right there on the top of the dashboard. All of this information is updated Monday through Friday, and it gets updated around noon. And then Saturdays and Sundays numbers are accumulated and updated on the Monday refresh. So you may not see some changes over the weekend, but they are updated on Monday. Nice thing about this too, I highlighted that last week that we had on testing. So remember, the Carolina Together testing program is one subset of how the positives come in. What we reflect on the dashboard is all positives. So that includes the testing that is done at the Carolina Together testing program, campus health, and any reported positives that come in from external sites to either occupational health for employees or campus health for students. And that's important for a number of reasons, because if it is a test that's done, let's say at a CVS or a Walgreens, students get their accommodations by notifying campus health of the positive. And so it's a very high capture rate of what that could look like. And same with employees and being able to take time away from work and having an excused absence related to a COVID infection. So all of that is reflected on the cumulative positive cases and the daily positive cases. And at the very bottom, we have our status of isolation and quarantine housing, which has been very adequate and spacious for this semester for our students. And if we go to the next slide. One thing that I think is really important to capture, I've gotten a lot of questions about, what is the difference between what we're seeing across the state and the numbers that we see with reflective positivity being high, and how is that so much different than what we see in our weekly reports? And I apologize for the small pictures here, but I just went on to the North Carolina DHHS website a couple days ago, and I just pulled screenshots of every county that had a UNC system school in it, and basically put them from highest vaccination rate in the top left-hand corner to the lowest vaccination rate in the bottom of your screen. And I wanted to highlight that with the numbers that Provost Bluen actually mentioned one of them, but we live in an extremely vaccinated community, Orange County being the highest vaccinated county in the state of North Carolina. So if you see there at the time where I pulled this, 80.
Amir, I think we lost you.
Yep, can't hear you, Amir. Let's see what the next slide says. Maybe we can walk through it together. We can figure.
I can fill in some. I've gone over this with Amir, and I think what Amir's point
Yeah.
here was. Oh, go
Sorry,
ahead.
sorry, Bob. Yeah, just wanted to highlight that we have a very, very highly vaccinated county, and then we have a even higher vaccinated university community that sits in that highly vaccinated county. So when you take both of those and you put them on top of each other, it's a really great percentage of vaccinated individuals that are interacting with our campus on a daily basis, which helps us in limiting the spread of our disease. So as you can see how that varies from county to county across the state, especially in our university communities, we're very fortunate to have a community that supports us both locally and in our university setting. And then if you go to the last slide, it's just really a summary. So very quickly, I just wanted to do what our Chancellor and Provost have already done. Just thank everyone for being so involved in our community and making sure to go and get your vaccine and keep each other safe. I think it's a great sign of being kind to each other. We continue to see really favorable statistics that show that our testing cadence and the work that we're doing has been very helpful to this point. We likely attribute that to the high community and university vaccination rates. And we've seen very few to date compliance issues with masking. So again, thank you for being considerate students. And if you have a chance to, thank your students for what they're doing, that's a great chance. And our faculty for just being so welcoming and inviting in the classroom. And a very important note, we will, as a result of including the unvaccinated faculty and staff starting on Monday, we will see an increase in our testing of all of our campus members. So whereas right now about 250 or so of the tests that we're doing on a weekly basis are employee tests that are testing so voluntarily, we're going to increase that number quite drastically on Monday. So we will be performing more tests on a weekly basis on our campus. And last and not least, I think one of the words that Mark said, if you have an opportunity to thank those who have been working over the past year and longer in doing the testing and all of the steps to keep our community safe and open, please thank them. They're doing work, a lot of them behind the scenes. I can't tell you how many hours I've spent on the phone with Mike Barker and his IT team. Our campus health team is working around the clock tirelessly. Our facilities team has been nothing but miraculous in being able to keep our buildings clean and accessible and ready to use. Our transportation team has helped us out dramatically with our testing program and being able to shuttle our services. This is really a university effort, and I can't say that enough without thanking our students in the Carolina Student Service Corps. So all this to say that I hope that this was a helpful summary to just recap kind of where we are on a campus and where we are as a community. And we look forward to the weekly testing for our faculty and staff. And I do think it's an appropriate time to revisit the unvaccinated campus testing for our students as well, given that the high, the positive trends that we've seen and the decrease in hospitalizations, ICU stays that are consistent with the state, but more importantly, the low positivity rate on our campus. So happy to take any questions or hear any thoughts or concerns that people have.
Great. It looks like, I thought I saw a hand. Deb, did you have your hand up or are you okay?
Dr. Barzin, we wanted to commend you on such a great testing program, and we have done so well. And our students appreciate the extended hours and the efficient testing. I have a related or an unrelated question. So pardon me if it's unrelated. As you know, the next step after good testing and you have controlled the pandemic is contact tracing, because a lot of people are in closed spaces without social distancing. And when they get affected, it's important to know with whom they had more than a 15-minute interaction. And now, as you know, better than all of us, that University of Maryland and other campuses have used QR codes for advanced contact tracing. In fact, our colleagues at Maryland say that they have developed a system by which each chair in a large classroom or in a small classroom has a QR code, and it tracks which student is there. Now, could you tell us something? I know the provost, Bob Lowen, and you had shared with us an update in August. Could you give us an update on what are the current plans for contact tracing?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Deb. Yeah, so what currently takes place for contact tracing is when a positive test is resulted or is identified. Like I mentioned, there's multiple avenues of where a patient can say, I have a positive COVID test. That's what originally starts what we call the case investigation that then triggers the contact tracing. So the first thing that's done is talking to that person who has the positive test. First things first, making sure that they are safe, doing well, that they're not having severe symptoms. We've been very fortunate to date that we don't know of any student hospitalizations for any of our positives that we have had on our campus, which is really great. What happens then next is what we call basically the immediate case investigation, which is working through who are your contacts over the 48 hours prior to your positive test or when you had symptoms. And so that's where it's the memory recall of working down the list of talking about where, what classrooms were you in, what sporting events did you go to or did you not attend? Were you in a scenario where you were at a social gathering with other people? And that's what the person goes through with our tracing team. I will say that when we had met last time, there was basically an idea thrown out to help students promote asking their neighbors who they were sitting with. And I can say that that has helped drive higher recall in terms of being able to say, I was in this classroom and sat next to this person, et cetera. There has not been an institution of like a large, like you're saying there, Deb, like a QR type procedure. We have not been able to do something like that. There's a lot of logistical hurdles to cover by doing that, but I can say that we feel like the contact tracing that we're doing without seeing a huge jolt up in positivity and caseload seems to be capturing those who are either close contacts or roommates, associated members of a person who's positive, without missing out on a large bucket of having a big bloom of positive tests of symptomatic people afterwards. So I think we're in a good position with the tracing. They're working very hard to improve the process as best as possible, but we haven't done like what you mentioned, like a University of Maryland where they have the QR readers.
Thank you.
Thanks. Another hand, Mark?
Yeah, thank you. I know this is like probably way too early, but at what point are you, and I know we have a long way to go, but at what point are there metrics that you look at that say, okay, when do we return more to a normal campus? Or do you not think that, I mean, is that, I guess my question basically is there an off-ramp, and are there metrics that say this is when we get to that off-ramp, or is that not?
Yeah, it's a really great question, Mark, and one that I'm glad that you asked. I think it's a really valuable thing for us to remember. I will say that what we're seeing right now, so as you saw in those charts, for example, last week we did over 44,000 tests for about 24 positive. So when you do the talking to those people, they either turn out to be mildly symptomatic a day or two after, or they might have had, a sniffle and they said, oh yeah, now I guess that was me presenting with a symptom. So what we're noticing is that there is a high capture rate in the symptomatic testing arena. And it may not have as much of a return on investment or in terms of saying, we have to test 500 people to get one positive in the asymptomatic arena. I think what we're showing here is that when you have a highly vaccinated community, the need for asymptomatic testing may go down over time. And that's what we're watching. We're trying to say, okay, when you have large cohorts of people doing testing over time, is the testing the thing that's really helping out, or is it the vaccination? So it is a little bit of a chicken or the egg situation, but we are closely watching to see, is there a big bloom? You know, from all of our public health experts and our infectious disease teams, Delta was a really unique situation. When variants happen, most of the time, the disease gets less contagious or less severe. You don't necessarily see a higher bloom like you did with Delta, where you had 8 to 10 times infectivity compared to the native strain. So for right now, we're very pleased with where the numbers are going. I think that eventually we would learn to live in an endemic environment where symptomatic testing is accepted and large-scale asymptomatic testing may not be needed. And I think that that may advance with boosters, and then of course vaccinations of our of younger people in our community.
Great, thank you.
Erica, and then we'll probably need to move on with our agenda after this question.
I also want to say thank you to everyone who is making it possible to manage this and still be present on campus. We're doing great. What's going to happen when fall break happens? Do we have a prediction about what things will result from that time?
Yeah, it's a really great question, Erica. So I actually looked back. I've been really working on that notion. I actually looked back over our big breaks that we have had during the spring of 2021 and then this semester as well, and looking at times around wellness days, sporting events like our athletic football games. After our first 2 home football games, we're very fortunate to not see large breaks. The other one I look back at was Labor Day, and that was actually a unique period because we had a 3-day holiday. Our fall break is a 4-day holiday. During the Labor Day holiday was a time when where Delta was in the university, and then also in the just in the national and geographic area was much worse. And so I am not expecting a huge surge from fall break, as we would have said around, let's say, the Labor Day holiday, because of just the prevalence of what's going on around there. We are having testing leading up to the week of going on fall break. So that Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. And we're encouraging people to get tested when they come back, just like we did around the Labor Day holiday. We expect testing volumes to be a little bit higher during that time. We usually see that around holidays and breaks. So cautiously optimistic that we stick around the same levels without big changes in the volume of positivity over the fall break period.
Okay, all right. Amir, thank you for bringing us up to date like this. And indeed, thank you to everyone that's been working with the testing program. It really is a huge, I mean, there are student volunteers involved, there are staff that really have been working overtime to make this happen. So very much appreciate all of that work. Let's move on to Dr. Westbrooks.
Thank you. My name is Elaine Westbrooks. I'm the Vice Provost for University Libraries and the 11th University Librarian. And I'd like to introduce my colleague, Nerea Yamas, who is Associate University Librarian for Collection Strategy and Services. So this update I have today is not anything I would ever want to do or dream of doing. But it's important that we're very transparent about what is happening with the budget. So as part of the effort to manage the campus budget, the university libraries have been asked to absorb a cut that will have a serious impact on library collections. Many of you should have seen the message that went out this morning from the provost and myself. If you would like additional updates, please go to the library's website at library.unc.edu. So the cuts that we are working on, or what we have announced, are the university's efforts to address the systemic budget challenges. And I would like to say that I don't believe that the library has been singled out in any way. However, what's very clear is that the library is very unique We serve the entire campus, regardless of discipline, age, department. We serve everyone. And these cuts are unprecedented. And they're going to touch everyone, student, faculty, and staff, no matter what area you study or what part of the campus you perform in. So in the current fiscal year, the cuts will be $2 million. And then we're preparing for an additional $3 million cut for the next fiscal year. The only way to reach the target is through large scale cancellation of journals and databases and by reducing the number of books and media items that we acquire and purchase. So taken together, this is a $5 million budget cut, and this represents approximately 50% of the library state materials budget. The library and the university administration has worked very hard throughout the year for ways to mitigate the impact of this cut and to create a sustainable budget moving forward. And I'd like to thank Bob Lewin and Kevin Guskowitz for their help, as well as Nate Knuffman and Steve Agostini. But unfortunately, we're now at the point where we have to submit our cancellations to the publishers. So I'd like to talk a little bit about how we got here. Well, typically when we make cuts of this nature, we will send out surveys to the faculty and staff, but largely faculty and students, of course, to understand the journals you need and how soon you need them. And unfortunately, we were not able to do that. We are in a very different position today. We no longer purchase any minor and secondary materials in any discipline. So we're cutting titles of importance in every area. This is inevitable. In the past, we would have time to set up meetings and meet with you. And that just wasn't possible given the depth and the breadth of the cuts that we have. For electronic subscriptions, we did look at usage data. And although these data are not perfect, it gives us an overall sense of how much the resources are being used by researchers across campus. We also took a look at the terms of the publisher licenses, as well as the pricing models. And we have determined that this is the moment to cancel many of these packages that are currently straining our budget. In addition, we want to incur penalties from terminating contracts with some of our publishers early. And so another factor that we have to take into consideration is inflation. And to just put it simply, inflation is killing us. We are spending upwards of $1 million a year just on inflation. And we have to think of this inflation as a cut to the library budget. But the scholarly journals and books have inflate, and this record inflation keeps getting worse and worse, and this has been going on for decades right now. And so we really are in a unsustainable and unfair system that has led us to cancel to the tune of $2 million this year. But you might recall that back in 2019, I came to this group to talk about the Elsevier situation. And so a lot of the things I'm talking about now were present back then, but we had to deal with Elsevier, which was a $2.6 million package. Now we're looking at the whole library collection. I do want you to know that there will be ways for you to get access to some of the materials that you need. We have a unique responsibility to look across the entire university at all parts of research, teaching, learning, and the clinical mission. And so making cuts, we have an obligation to apportion them equitably. So we cannot disadvantage one department, discipline, or area in order to support another. Because of these factors, all these factors interact. There is no single formula, algorithm, or across the board percentage to apply. And because these cuts are much deeper and broad than any of us have managed in the past, there will be no room for nuance or deliberation. So even with these significant cuts to collections, I want to reassure you that the library is still here to support your research, your teaching, as well as your clinical work. The scholarly communications environment is not what it used to be. In fact, between our Elsevier cancellation last year and the experience of supporting research during the pandemic, we have developed more tools than ever to connect you with the important information resources. We have interlibrary loan agreements with other libraries that can bring you books and articles. We have expanded document delivery options that allow us to order single journal articles on your behalf and deliver it to your inbox. And in some cases, we could do this within a few hours. For books, over the last several years, we've been making a shift from buying most titles just in case we needed them to be buying titles just in time. And we continue to refine this process for books. These are not ideal changes that I'm sharing with you, but they mean adjusting all of your expectations of what is available and when. Inevitably, there will be some materials or products that simply cannot be replaced. At the same time, the rising cost of journals and databases has meant that we are already well along the path to a library with smaller collection that we own or license. And so I have been a relentless advocate for open access and for sustainable scholarship for all the reasons to not be in this position that we're in right now. But what I could say is open access is a long-term solution. And it's not the only way that libraries can be protected from budget cuts that we're discussing today, but is an important reality and something that we certainly have to explore. So I'm prepared to take some questions, but I just wanted to make sure you know about some of the resources at your disposal. Every department and unit on this campus has a liaison librarian. Please reach out to your liaison librarian if you want to know specifics about articles, journals, titles in your area. I'm providing a very broad overview. If you want specifics about your discipline, please reach out to your liaison librarian. As I already mentioned, you can go to the library website for updates. And if you have any more questions, we will have some virtual discussions. One will be on Tuesday, October 19th at 2 o'clock. And another one will be Monday on October 25th at 1 p.m. You can find out all the information you need about this on our website at library.unc.edu. There you can register. So I'll stop right there and see what kind of questions you might have.
Thank you, Elaine. I know this is not easy and it's hard to be the bearer of bad news, but we appreciate you being straightforward with us about it. Barbara?
Thank you. Elaine, I appreciate the situation that you're in. This is not a situation of your making. It's not a situation of your choosing. And so in a sense, what I want to say is less to you than it is to the university as a whole. I also, before I say those things, want to say that I appreciate all of the work that you and your staff have been doing. I have taken advantage of these services that you are describing. And so I have personal experience. But my reaction is less for me as an individual scholar than it is thinking about the university as a whole. And so it's, I guess what I want to say is but the library, the library is critical to the mission of scholarship and research at this university. And I was just stunned to receive your email this morning. It's hard for me to imagine how we can maintain the rankings that we were so proudly talking about just an hour ago without easy access to a library. And I'm thinking electronic access in particular. In my own case, I have taken advantage of of your interlibrary loan. Some of the journals I need, you don't have. It's fine. I can work with that sort of. But when I'm busy trying to put grant proposal together, I need access to information in that moment. It's sort of a just-in-time approach to putting proposals together. Or another example is doing journal reviews, where I need right in that moment. I don't want to stop what I'm doing and wait a couple days in order to track down some important reference. So, but as I said, it's not really about me personally. I'm just thinking about my experience across the university. And I just want to say that, we talk about, cuts, this, cutting into muscle. I mean, this one is cutting off a leg. I'm, maybe a poor metaphor, but I just, it's not really a question for you. It's just a statement that this university needs to think of a way to restore that funding. How can we compete? And how can we compete with other universities? How can we maintain our rankings? How do we attract faculty? How do we retain our faculty? To me, this is just at the core of who we are. So again, not a question, but I really felt that I needed to say my piece. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. I agree with everything you're saying. I remain concerned about our ability to support the research, teaching, learning, and clinical mission of this university because of these cuts. And there's no question that our rankings, in terms of the library, there's no question that we will drop significantly. And I also have concerns about the impact on the overall ranking of the university. There are some disciplines where the library plays a significant role in the rankings, such as law, for example. And those are things that are certainly concerning.
Joan.
Thanks very much. And I very much want to echo exactly what Barbara just said, and also say that this is not at all directed to Dr. Westbrook and her team. In fact, part of the concern I have is the difficulty that we have, not just how this will be perceived by faculty and staff and students, but the truth is we're going to lose good librarians in this as well, because I'm assuming no one spends their life trying to work to the point that they then get to decimate the collection that they spent their life putting together. But I just, from the perspective of faculty and the perspective of people that I represent through the law school, I just want to say I agree that this is a really, really terrible idea, and it's not one that is required. What I keep coming back to is the issue that many people have raised over the past few months of this budget issue not being manufactured in any sense, and that the university is facing some very, very serious financial problems that we need to get under control. We need to get that budget under control. But the timing, the decision to have to do this in a 2-year period when we're still in the midst of a pandemic is a really, really terrible idea to the extent that leads us to do things like this. We have faculty members and staff members who are just hanging on by a thread, that have dealing with the issues of COVID, of ongoing concerns about positive tests and quarantines involving their family members. We have people for whom this is kind of the last straw. The choice to do something like this at this point in time, when faculty and staff and student morale is so incredibly low, when faculty members, junior faculty members, their ability to spend the time and resources to be able to create scholarship is hanging by a thread to begin with. And then we add this on top of it for nothing but our own manufactured schedule that we need to do it over the next 2 years. I'm sorry, but on behalf of myself as a faculty member and those I represent from the law school, I think this is a really bad idea and I strongly object. Thank you.
Thank you, Joan. I'm going to just, before we go to the next questions, there is a comment in the chat thanking Elaine and the library staff and asking for more information as to why the library is the target of the scale cut and how that compares to other units. I don't know whether Elaine or perhaps the Chancellor or Provost are in position to speak to that.
So if I could just jump in, and Mimi, I mentioned you earlier today, or I think Amy did it, I have to jump off of this into another meeting. And Elaine, I want to just say thank you to you, because I know this has not been easy. I know that you've been working with your team and other leaders on campus and faculty included to get to the right place on this. I think it would be helpful if you perhaps walked through some of the process, because the cut to the library is not the 1.5 and 7.5 over each of the next 2 years that every other unit has taken. Elaine came to us back in the early parts of the summer and talked about the challenges that this might create. At that point, we agreed to restore back some of that cut. And then recently as about 10 days ago, we restored some additional funding moving forward. And so I do want to emphasize that we are watching this carefully and working alongside Elaine, and want to do everything to be sure that we're doing this in a way that will not negatively impact a lot of people, even though Elaine has said this, there will be an impact to this with this. So Elaine, I don't know if you want to say a little bit about the process you went through to help us understand the challenges and how the funding that's been restored does in fact help.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point, Chancellor. I think there's several factors at play. The biggest one is inflation, right? Like I mentioned, every year we take $1 million cut. And so when we started this fiscal year, we were in the hole, $2 million, right? So that's one factor. And so we took the 7.5% cut, but on top of that, we also received a 60% reduction in our F&A. So that's another $1.2 million in the hole. So what I'm saying is, when you look at library collections, these are recurring expenses. When you subscribe to a journal, it's never for 2 weeks or it's for years, right? And so the university has really tried to give us one-time funds to bridge us and to mitigate the impacts of these cuts. The problem is the one-time funds really are just insufficient. I mean, they are kicking the can down the road. And so I'm very appreciative of the one-time funds because it has helped to soften the blow. But it's really, I mean, the situation is just so dire that these one-time funds do not allow us to save, some of the big subscriptions that we really need. And the one-time dollars are generally going towards inflation. So I think it's just kind of complicated the way we do these things and how we sign licenses and the timeline that we have. But the university has definitely chipped in and has been trying to help us get through this process. The problem is we don't have a sustainable budget. And until we get a sustainable budget, we will forever be in this vicious cycle of cutting and cutting. And I know that Bob and the Chancellor and Finance are all wanting to get to that sustainable place, but we're just not there yet.
And the inflation issue that you mentioned, and Elaine has shared this with us since, as she's mentioned, since she got here, that there are many other universities that are struggling with this and canceling subscriptions. I mean, my understanding, Elaine, is that many other universities canceled the subscriptions, 2, 3, 4 years ago to try to get to a better place to incentivize some of these, journals to put an end to this inflation and to make it more affordable for universities. And so, again, I want to continue to work alongside Elaine, as I know Bob does, and others. So I understand the concerns that are being raised, but so we'll come back to this and continue to work alongside you, Elaine. And I'm sorry, but I have to jump off at this point, and I don't know if Bob is still with us or not.
Okay.
And can I just say, maybe quick, I think the Chancellor raises a very important part of the point, which is this is a higher ed problem. This is not a library problem. This is not a Carolina problem. This is a problem across entire higher ed. And I think we as a community have a responsibility to work in concert with our peer institutions and with the publishing industry and within the entire ecosystem to come up with a solution. And so we are, of course, our situation at Carolina is unique. The budget just isn't sufficient. However, I just want to stress that the Chancellor's right. This is a very big problem that goes way beyond libraries.
All All right, thank you. It does sound like it's complex. And we have two more questions. Kate has put a really important comment in the chat, I think, about medical literature. Kate, do you want to speak to
Yes,
that?
please, Elaine, thank you for all of this. My heart aches. I provide maternal fetal medicine care for complex pregnancies, and to not have, we rely on immediate access to literature on a daily basis to inform our decisions, to teach our trainees, to teach them to think. It's more than a higher ed issue. It's in our environment. This is a quality healthcare issue. If we don't have immediate access to medical literature to help inform our decisions, we won't be able to take good care of our families, our friends, and our community.
Thank you, Kate. And Jan?
Thank you. Unfortunately, the Chancellor has left, but my question really was, what is the structure of the budget for the libraries? Where does the money come from? Does it come from FNA? Does it come from state funds? And how does the way we fund our libraries compares to our peers? Let's say University of California at Berkeley or University of Michigan. Are we similar? Are we underfunding? Are we overfunding? Where are we?
Okay.
Jan, that is an extremely complicated question that I will not be able to address. I mean, this is my 5th research university, and I'm definitely familiar. I could tell you about Michigan and Cornell and Nebraska and the University of Pittsburgh, but we're all over the place. I mean, the way libraries are funded, it varies greatly across institutions, even within just the public universities. And so I'm not able to go into those details. I just think that what's important is that we understand that the library is truly part of research, the research enterprise, and the academic mission. And in many cases, the library is seen as some kind of service center, right? And I think the reality is we are academic, and we support the academic research, teaching, learning, clinical mission. And so as long as we understand that this is what the library provides for this campus as an academic research tool and service, I think that might change the way we think about the funding. The other thing I want to mention to Dr. Menard, what she said is that this is bigger than higher ed, and talking about healthcare. I think that is a tremendously important point, that it's about, in my mind, humanity and the ability to solve the problems of the world and to eliminate human suffering. That's why we do research. That's why we have universities, is to improve the human condition. And we have to build upon knowledge. And that's why libraries are critical. And that's why libraries are trusted today. And so we have to start thinking about this as everybody's problem. We have to start thinking about open access more seriously. After this pandemic, it is very apparent that there's no way we would have come up with all these vaccines and treatments if it weren't for open access and open data. Researchers all across this world collaborated and shared 300 to 400,000 titles, articles that were shared only about COVID-19. And so the ability to share data and the ability to share research without paywalls made a very big difference in our lives. And it accelerated the treatments that we now have for COVID-19. So you can't tell me that open access doesn't work and it doesn't matter. It does matter, and it made a very big difference in COVID-19. So I just invite you to come to the sessions. I invite you to work with your societies and talk to them about the way the publishing works and the economics of publishing. We have to think more seriously about open science, open scholarship, open data, open access. The research at this university should be available to the world, and it's not. It's locked behind these paywalls, and it's not fair to the taxpayers, and it's not fair to the everyone else who expects a public university to be able to share its rich research with the world. And I could go on and on, but I just had to point out that COVID-19 reality about how open access has played an important role in saving lives.
Okay, thank you. It sounds like we need to have more conversation about this, a lot more. I see the provost would like to have a word, and then I'm going to move us on. But Elaine, I'm hopeful maybe you'll join us for FEC at sometime in the next month, and we can talk about this in more detail.
Well, Mimi, thank you. And I just want to echo everything that Elaine has said and follow up on a comment that Jan and others made. We really have two problems here. One is the predatory practices of the publishers that are making it impossible for not only our university, but just about every university in the country to keep pace. And that's what Elaine is talking about with regards to inflation. The other is the business model, and I think Elaine has a challenge in responding to Jan's question with regards to what exactly is the business model for the libraries. The business model, in my view, needs to be totally reevaluated, and in many respects create a dollar flow that scales to activity. So, for example, the purpose of the library is to support the mission of the university. And the mission of this university is quite broad: research, education, service, community service. And so we need to make sure that wherever there are sources of funds like F&A dollars, that should scale to the research enterprise, and a certain percentage of those should come back into the library. We have not done that historically. The education program should scale as well, as we have enrollment dollars, come in. A certain percentage of those perhaps should be applied, directly to the library, and doing that in a way that is scalable. It still doesn't address, even if we had that in place today, which we don't, but perhaps which we can move toward. We still have this challenge with regards to inflation. And the library costs, based upon increases in publishing charges to us, is scaling at a rate of inflation that is unprecedented in higher education. And I don't know what the number is, Elaine, but I think it's somewhere between 12 to 15% a year, and sometimes even higher. And when you have such a large expense associated with those, it's very difficult to sustain. So I just wanted to let you know that Elaine and I have talked, I won't say exhaustively, but extensively about this challenge. And I have shared, my thoughts with Kevin and with Nate. And I'm hopeful that we can come up with a better business model moving forward. Thank you, Mimi.
Thank you, Provost Bluen. We just have one last question. Does our health system help to fund the library? Is that a yes or no question, maybe mine or not?
Yes, we do get support from a variety of options from the health affairs schools. And, that's a pretty complicated question, but I guess the short answer is yes.
Okay. Let's plan to go into more detail at FEC in a couple of weeks. We'll put that on the agenda, provided it works with your schedule, Elaine. Thank you. All right, now to athletics. I think we're starting with Lisa Broom and Faculty Athletics Committee Chair Melissa Guile.
Thanks, Mimi. I'll go ahead and kick it off. I am Lisa Broom, and I'm a faculty member at the School of Law. I'm also the Chancellor's appointee as the university's faculty athletics representative. Melissa Guile from the Keenan Flagler Business School and the chair of the Faculty Athletics Committee, and I have submitted our written reports as FAR and Fact Chair, which are linked to your agenda. We stand ready to answer any questions you may have about those reports, but we thought we would use our time here today to introduce you to a significant change in intercollegiate athletics that occurred this summer, and that is the new ability of student athletes to be compensated by third parties for use of their name, image, and likeness, or what we'll refer to as NIL. Our student musicians can be paid for a gig, They could record and sell records. Student artists can sell their work. Many of our students may also be receiving compensation for being social media influencers. Until this summer, student athletes had significant limits around their ability to earn money in a similar fashion. So I'm going to do a quick intro on background to NIL. Athletic Director Bubba Cunningham will then talk about how NIL has rolled out on our campus. And then Melissa Guile will do a Q&A with one of our student athletes, Chris Gray from the lacrosse team, about the student athlete perspective on NIL. So how did we get here? A number of states began enacting NIL laws for student athletes in their states, with the earliest effective date of those state laws being July 1 of this year. The NCAA then got busy and proposed some rules to permit NIL with some so-called guardrails, but then pulled those rules from consideration when the Department of Justice expressed some concern. The NCAA then sought some congressional legislation that would have a federal standard that would preempt the differing state laws, but they were unsuccessful in getting anything enacted by Congress. So on June 30, the NCAA adopted an interim rule that basically says, student athletes, you need to follow the state law in your state, if there is any, as well as any additional requirements on NIL that your school may impose. The basic limits are no compensation may be based on athletic performance and achievement. In other words, you can't make more if you win a championship. No compensation can be contingent on your enrollment at a particular institution, and no compensation can be given for work not performed. In North Carolina, on July 2nd, Governor Roy Cooper issued an executive order, which was basically very similar to that NCAA rule. He added, however, that if the student athlete has an authorized representative, like an agent or a professional, helping them with the NIL agreement, that person must comply with the North Carolina Athlete Agent Act. And also the executive order said that a school could impose certain additional limits on the NIL compensation, but is not required to impose those limits. So Bubba, with that broad framework, how is NIL being done here at UNC, and what restrictions, if any, have been put on the ability of UNC student athletes to use their NIL?
Thank you, Lisa. What we've done, we've hired a couple of companies to work with us since it is new space. There's a company called Influencer. Influencer is a company that we've actually used for a couple of years that has allowed our student athletes. So what we do during athletic events is we have photographers there taking pictures. And then the pictures are uploaded to a website, and the student athletes can then download those pictures and use them on their social media site. So that's a company that also provides education for our students to try to monetize their name, image, and likeness. We work very closely with the university licensing office. The student would have to get permission from the university licensing to use pictures in a commercial package. They can use them just to advertise their games and promote their sport. But if they want to make it a for-profit where they can represent a company, they have to get permission from our licensing office. But in addition to Influencer, we've also worked with Compass. Compass is another company that allows our student athletes to upload their information that if they're pursuing an agreement with a company, and allow those students to have us review the contract that they're entering into with an agent. And our compliance office meets every day at 8:15. And what we're trying to provide is incredible service to our student athletes so we can help guide them along that process. Whether or not it's a legal question, and Lisa's been very helpful in working with the law school and providing counsel, pro bono counsel for student athletes who want to take advantage of it. In addition to that, we review the contracts from a compliance standpoint, and there's basically no rules. So it's the first time our compliance office has been in the position of saying yes to everything that comes across their plate, and they want to encourage the student athletes to seek advice so that they understand what the tax implications are, they understand what the commitments are to the agent if they have an agent working on their behalf. And so our focus has been primarily on service and education for our student athletes. Each of those companies I mentioned have educational videos and modules that the students can watch to help them learn about the new NIL space and how to navigate it. And I think the best person to answer the question about how it's going is probably Chris Gray, who Melissa's going to talk to. But in a general sense, I can give you some idea. We have a little bit over 150 of our 800 student athletes that have entered into in excess of 200 different contracts with individual companies to support their NIL activities. I would say that 60% of those are for men, 40% are for women. And I will say that we have incredible athletes in field hockey and women's lacrosse. And those two individual students have done exceptionally well. And I'm pleasantly surprised that those opportunities were afforded to them. So I can turn it over to Melissa, and she can talk to Chris about his personal experience.
Thanks, Bubba. My name is Melissa Guile, and I am assistant clinical professor in the business school, and I am chair of the faculty athletics committee this year. I wanted to thank Chris Gray from men's lacrosse for taking the time to talk with us today. Chris, I was wondering if we could just start with just a little bit of background about your where you're from, and a little bit about what your major is and current and future aspirations.
Yeah, of course. Well, thank you all for having me. I appreciate it. It's an honor to be here. Like Melissa said, my name's Chris Gray. I'm from Long Island, New York. I'm currently a first-year MBA student here at Keenan Flagler, and I'm on the lacrosse team.
Wonderful. So NIL, it's been in place about 6-7 weeks here. From your perspective, what kind of NIL activities are UNC student athletes engaged in that you know about?
Yeah, I think it definitely varies by sport. It might be a little different for high revenue generating sports like basketball and football. But I think most of the deals that I've seen have been with, brands associated with athlete sports. So whether it's an equipment provider or a sponsor or a school sponsor, it seems to kind of be the go-to for student athletes. Another one I've seen is athletes partnering with hometown brands that they associate closely with. So I think there's a lot of value in that. There's a sense of giving back to the community that athletes like. And I think finally, another pretty big one is athletes being interested in partnering with local Chapel Hill businesses, whether it's a food organization or just a local business they're passionate about. For example, there was Alex Brandwines, who owns Brandwine Bagels down the street. There was a really interesting opportunity to be a part of his organization and kind of give back to him because he supports athletics so much. So I know a lot of people are interested in that.
Yeah, and I was thinking about other opportunities for entrepreneurial stuff, which is there's you have two future donut empire currently on the men's lacrosse team. It's called Nando's Nuts. You all should check it out. One of our concerns on the FAC has been about NIL being yet another thing that our student athletes are undertaking. And I was wondering if you could speak to how it's impacting education, both in terms of like time commitment on the one hand, but also maybe perhaps making certain coursework more meaningful and having real world applications.
Yeah, I mean, that's such a valid thing to worry about, just given the time constraints of our schedules. But I would say it really hasn't had any negative impacts on student athletes' educations. Sometimes it can definitely add to your daily schedule, but I wouldn't necessarily say it takes a lot of time out of your day. I mean, at the end of the day, it really is all about time management. So as long as you're prioritizing the things you need, then you should be fine. For me personally, I've been able to prioritize my studies and athletics, and NLI has been secondary to that. And just going off that, I know you mentioned it before, but I feel like NIL has just supplemented my education. I've been exposed to so many different core business concepts and experiences through the activities that I'm engaging in. Whether it's negotiating with the head of a company or advocating for myself or reading through a contract, it's all real world experience that I'm getting that I feel like is really going to help me post-graduation.
Yeah, and especially with the degree that you're pursuing, I can see how it's really valuable. Is your sense that most students are doing this on their own, or or through the just using the resources that UNC is providing, like using Influencer, for example, or the new NIL, the compliance office that Bubba was mentioning, or do you see a lot of them reaching out to sports agents who help them with this?
I would say most student athletes right now handle it on their own. Again, it could be very different for the higher revenue generating sports, but I think there are opportunities to get an agent out there, and it's definitely available. Also, NLI marketing agencies that are specifically focused on advocating for student athletes have become much more widespread during this time. I know they reach out to student athletes, whether it's through Instagram DM or an email. It's definitely out there, but I would say most athletes handle it on their own. But just to go off that, UNC and the compliance staff on the athletic side has done such an incredible job just providing us with the access or resources that we need to make sure that we're not jeopardizing our eligibility or really just maximizing NIL to the best that we can. So it's really just a credit to compliance over there for their support.
Yeah, and some examples, just so you know, of the type of programming that's being offered is social media training, contract help. Of course, Lisa's office with the law school is offering pro bono help with that. Financial literacy workshops, and also, of course, looking at taxes, with NIL, if the athletes are earning income, some of this, they may not be able, they will have to pay taxes for the first time. So that's, of course, a new challenge. Well, thank you, Chris. I really, really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us today. I was maybe turning it back over to Lisa to see what's the plan next.
Okay, well, I think we're pretty much out of time. So maybe if there are any questions, Melissa and I or any of the other speakers will be happy to answer them.
Okay, I'm not seeing questions at this point. So thank you, thanks. And thank you, Chris, for coming and sharing your experience with us. Really appreciate that. It's always nice to hear from students and what their experiences are from all over different parts of campus. I think one main thing that we wanted to talk about today was a little bit about safety protocols. People have been curious, I think, about how things are going with the with having home football games, stadiums quite full, a variety of people making different choices about masking in the stadium. Dr. Barzan said that we're not seeing big upticks. So, but we did want to know a little bit more. I know some of us have heard about these golden tickets that get handed out. We're not quite, all of that. So turning it over to Bubba and to the rest of his team.
Great. Thank you, Mimi. I'm not sure what a golden ticket is, so we'll have to have somebody else maybe clarify that for us. But I'm just going to briefly introduce it, and I'll turn it over to John Bruner and Dr. Sioka. John Bruner is Associate Athletic Director who oversees all of our event and game management and has done a remarkable job. And he and Rick Steinbacher originally back in 2020, along with Dr. Sioka and many of the health experts on campus, wrote a parallel plan to the campus reentry into the campus environment. And we mirrored it last year with our athletic programs. And they did the exact same thing this year. And they worked very closely with the medical experts. And they've come up with a great plan that has worked so far, knock on wood, for a couple of games. We haven't seen any spikes or any spread. And we're trying to be consistent with all of the campus policies, the Orange County policies. And we've had incredible cooperation between John Bruner, Dr. Sioka, and the Orange County health officials. So I will turn it over to John, and he'll walk us through the Game Day 2021 plan, our goals and mission, and a lot of the mitigation steps that we have tried to take to make it a healthy and safe environment for people to attend. So I'll turn it over to John Bruner.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bubba, and thank you, Mimi. I'm going to try to share my screen, go over a quick presentation, and some of this is going to dovetail in what Dr. Barzan alluded to earlier. And I just want to start out saying, like Professor McNeely, how grateful we are to have the leadership campus support to allow us to host these events for our students and our student athletes in the community. And we'll thank some other kind of key leaders along the way. For those that do know me, partnerships are something that I care deeply about, and partners with the community, with different parts of campus. And so it's been an amazing opportunity to work together in so many different ways. But like Bubba said, the foundational mission of our event management team is to provide an outstanding and unique game day experience for all the Carolina community members, each and every time: student athletes, coaches, visiting teams, officials, staff, and fans. And implicit in that goal is safety, right? We want to provide a safe experience. And now with the pandemic, these considerations have been expanded to the public and community health considerations that required adjustments and additional considerations. And as we know, sporting events do bring people together, and that's been acknowledged and assumed to have these inherent risks with spreading COVID. These are some partnerships that we've alluded to by Bubba. You know, the campus EOC, our risk management, campus police, they're essential in everything that we do. Environmental health and safety, emergency management, campus health, the UNC health. Every big plan we utilize includes partnerships there. Orange County Health Department, as Bubba alluded to, new opportunities to work with the Office of Executive Vice Chancellor and Provost, UNC system facility and event managers. We've hosted weekly calls since March of 2020 with every UNC system to share resources, ideas, and how to help support each other. The NCAA, the ACC, NACTA is our professional organization, and the Event Facility Managers Association, and then our peer institutions. This next slide shares a description for some of those considerations that we alluded to last year, and trying to be very deliberate and intentional. And each touch point, it just shows what a complex environment it is, and how we try to align ourselves with everything from federal, state, local, university, and trying to be in parallel and lockstep. And that also aligns with our normal process. So this is a description to show what we normally work with: more than 30 stakeholder groups throughout campus, throughout the community, throughout the state, to work together to provide those great experiences for game day. This is a really wonderful program. Many of you have seen this. This is our Carolina Together Ambassador program, and I've really enjoyed working with Rick Wernoski, Abbas, Professor Barzan, Ken Pittman. And this is something that started fall 2020. We reinvigorated in the spring of 2020, and this is where the golden ticket comes from. And so instead of kind of a stick, we wanted to use the Willy Wonka example of giving a golden ticket when we see behaviors that we want repeated. And so you can earn a ticket by demonstrating wearing a mask, physically distancing, doing a good job having your barcode ready when you're ready to get tested at the amazing Carolina Together testing program. And we've utilized this at some of our athletic events as well to encourage the behaviors that we want rewarded, which is something that Coach Smith alluded to as well. This is just some focus that we were aware of. So we were planning for full capacity. Currently, masks were not required outdoors, but must be worn indoor spaces. So that includes restrooms, elevators, the Blue Zone at football games, and transportation services. We worked hard with Town of Chapel Hill to talk about the Tar Heel Express and Carolina Livery, and we actually enforce it. And so we have a 3 strikes and you're out policy, which we utilized back in fall 2020 when that was a requirement outdoors. We were very deliberate with our pre-communication, so email, social media, press releases, web release. You'll see ubiquitous signage throughout campus, public address announcements, video board spots regular to really encourage that, to emphasize that masks are required indoors and encouraged outdoors. We have complimentary masks available at all entrances, at all of our sporting events, and fan services. Vaccinations are strongly encouraged. We'll talk about a partnership we did with Campus Health at the first game. And like was alluded to earlier, all of our staff must attest they're vaccinated, and they're going to have to be tested regularly if they're not, starting next week. And then we also try to protect those student athletes that masks are required regardless whether you're indoors or outdoors when you're within 15 feet of the team areas, and then limited photographers available field level. We felt it was comfortable and safe to allow fan promotions, so interactive activities, Tar Heel Town. We've made some adjustments where there's not those community bounce houses, but there are some more isolated, spaced experiences. We do allow those on-field promotions. We had a number of recognitions at the last game. We're going to recognize our retired coaches who retired over the last 18 months at this game, and our women's tennis team for their success. Small controlled groups, but not some of these larger groups. We still are trying to physical distance inside where possible in certain areas where you're going to be in those locations for a while, such as our press box. We're currently doing media interviews via Zoom. We're still using that electrostatic sprayer, and we're still emphasizing the signage, the wear, wait, and wash. Don't require that 6-foot physical distance, but we do want people continue to maintain those hygienic efforts. And then what other mitigation efforts? We're all cashless, so there's no money changing hands for parking tickets, merchandise, or concessions. We're using our app to do some of those pickups that we're all become accustomed to, where you order in advance. We're being more deliberate in our post-game surveys, asking about community safety, how people feel, secret shopper programs. We have a fan text line that's available for any concerns. We've reiterated some of our training, the fundamentals for wearing bags. We maintain our regular our security as well. And for the first game, we had all the tickets out. About 80% of the people showed up. We had about 30 mask warning cards issued indoors, no objections. And we partnered with Campus Health to provide that vaccine clinic and gave 2 free tickets to everyone who did do that. And we had 35 folks take us up on that. So there's 35 people that are vaccinated. We felt great about that and grateful for our partnership with Campus Health. And then at the football game versus Virginia, we had about 95% capacity, and there was even better compliance indoors. And Student Stores Pharmacy is open for vaccines from 11 to 3. And then just similar to the charts that you saw earlier with Professor Bazir. So the upper slide shows everything from when classes started. You can see that downward trend in that first bar. That's that first home game against Georgia State. And then here's more since the first game that we had. And that's sharing that there really isn't been indicated an epidemiological link between the football crowds and any spread. And I'll defer to Dr. Sioka if he has anything else to add.
Thank you.
That was excellent, John. I have nothing else to add to that. I'm available for any questions there are.
Okay, terrific. This is good news. We had hoped to have you at our last meeting before the football games were starting on campus. So this feels a little after the fact, but we're happy to have you today. Do we have any questions? Or we want to make sure that we receive the athletics committee's reports by title is another piece of what we'd like to do. Unless there are questions for our guests.
Amy, I'm sorry we were not here for the first one, but I would have rather been here instead of losing at Virginia Tech. My apologies.
Well, you'll know better next time. Okay. Jill, will you take us through accepting the reports by title?
Sure. So we are receiving the reports today from the faculty athletics representative and the faculty athletics committee, and council members received those to read in advance. If there are no questions from faculty council members about those reports, we'll deem them received by title. Anybody have any questions about the reports? Okay. Without objection, then they're received.
Excellent. All right, moving on. Dr. Page, are you with us?
I am.
Okay.
I am. Thanks for having me. You ready?
Yes, absolutely. I personally am very concerned about how our healthcare folks are faring during this time. And so I really wanted to make sure that we remember what people on our campus are going through in the hospital. So thank you for being here to talk with us about that.
Yeah, well, thank you for leading in with that sort of a heart. We are so grateful to have such a supportive university community, and I'm glad to have a few minutes to be with everyone today. I do recognize that today is glorious out there, and I may be the thing between you and that beautiful weather. So I'll jump right in. I understand that Dr. Barzan already talked some today about the state of the university with COVID and testing and vaccines. So I'll share more about what we are experiencing at UNC Health across the state and a little bit about what we're doing to try to do all the right things and make a lot of effort and focused effort to take care of our patients to the best of our ability and to take care of our teammates who are indeed under a lot of stress, as you alluded. So I really just have a couple slides. I'm going to try to pull them up myself. Okay, can you see those? They may not quite be big enough. Let me see what I can do here. Maybe that worked. Okay. So this is our hospital census. And as you know, we did begin to see an increase in our inpatients across the system around the beginning of July. So you can see that there on the graph. I'm sure you've seen this before. And it really accelerated through the August and early September timeframe. And this was caused entirely by the Delta variant and its increased transmissibility, as you know. So that was also accelerated by slower uptake of the vaccines than we anticipated. But since our July testing, we are able to test and see the type of variants that are coming. 100% of our positive test cases have been from the Delta variant. And the overwhelming number of patients in our hospital, the overwhelming majority in our hospitals and in our ICUs and in the patients on ventilators are from patients who are unvaccinated. So that is very sad to us. This has strained our systems in a number of ways, with some of our facilities seeing numbers of patients that were higher than the previous peak in January. And perhaps not everybody is aware of that kind of strain going on in our hospitals. We do have a greater knowledge of how to care for COVID patients. And the big stress for us is not only the overwhelming number of patients, but also the staffing challenges and the morale issues that have been a major part of our stress of late. And the staffing constraints has then led us to have to decrease a lot of our non-emergent surgeries in order to have enough capacity with the staff that we have to take care of COVID patients and for other patients who need acute care. So another difference in the last few months since I believe Dr. Burks was here is the increase that we've had in pediatric patients in our hospitals and the strain that has been. We've seen a surge not only in COVID patients in our hospitals, but also in all of the other respiratory viruses that have had unusual times and peaks that have strained our ICUs and our hospital systems and pediatrics. So where we are now, we are, you've seen this, I'm sure before, this is our modeling that we use to predict and prepare our resources across the state to be sure that we are tracking and planning for what we anticipate to happen. And you can see in the blue line is the actuals there. So at this moment, we are seeing a very gradual reduction in the number of patients that we're treating at our hospitals, and that predictive modeling has been pretty accurate all along. So we feel encouraged by the fact that it is going down from where it was a couple of weeks ago. That being said, and it's really good news and we want to celebrate that, but we recognize we have many, many challenging weeks ahead as we still project a COVID census of over 100 patients through December. So still a lot higher than what we were experiencing this past summer. So I'm going to take that.
Dr. Page, I just wanted to clarify, you were talking about all of the health system across the state. Is
Yes,
that
we
correct? We're not.
Yes,
just
I am. When we show this, we really think of our, we are the state's health system, and we work together to really unify one UNC Health across the state. So yes, this does encompass many, many, many hospitals. Here at the medical center, we follow a pretty similar trend with that. And so still remain to have a significant number of patients in the hospital, in the ICU, and then a number of patients who are no longer considered positive from COVID because it's been more than 21 days, but are still unfortunately in the hospital with really significant health needs where they require ongoing hospitalization. So all that together has been quite a bit of strain. I'm going to try, did I stop sharing?
I'm sorry to follow up, but I think that this is, people really, I think, want to understand this. And so in our hospital here in Chapel Hill, are most of those folks from Orange County, or are they coming in from other places?
They are, I mean, thankfully, we have one of the highest vaccination rates in our county, and that's something to really celebrate. So at the medical center, we currently have 53 patients who are in the hospital, 15 of which who are in the ICU, plus an additional 45 patients who, as I said, used to be positive and are now still in the hospital. They come from all over, but they tend to come more from the Triangle area and some more remote. I don't have the specific numbers from where they come from, but I would say that we do work hard to be able to accept transfers from our other hospitals once they are strained and needing ICU beds or needing staffed ICU beds, which tend to be the bigger challenge. And so we work together to try where we can to accept transfers and also to be able to work across our different hospitals to maximize our ability to take care of the patients.
Thank you.
Am I still sharing screen or am I off of that?
You're off.
Great. Okay, so I wanted to take that down and just focus a little bit on our teammates across the state. And when I talk about our teammates across the state, it's really not different than our teammates here at the medical center. So while I'm talking more broadly, this is very relevant. And a lot of these themes are not just about UNC Health, but it's all hospitals and all clinics and healthcare much more broadly across our nation. At this point, in the pandemic, our teams, as you might relate to, are tired emotionally, physically. Our teammates are frustrated and sometimes feeling angry as they're suffering through the stress of all this, and some of which is preventable. So there's a sense of isolation and the perception from our teammates that some have moved on as if this thing is over. And while they are still slogging this out every day and treating such high numbers of very, very sick people and experiencing the moral element and the hurt that comes from caring from such very sick people. So there's some disillusionment in that early in the pandemic, there was such a huge outpouring of love and support. And I hear from you that has not ended. But yet there's a sense that people have to guard their hearts because we all went through this sort of feeling of relief and now it's still carrying on. And so people are mentally bracing against what could come and still just wrestling with what feels like a sense of isolation among many of our teammates. So what are we doing? I've laid out some of those challenges, and I'll tell you some of the things we're focusing on as a health system. I want to spend time just talking first about our teammates and what our clinical plans are, and then of course I'm happy to have questions, but I know that we're at the end of the day. So we're focusing clinically on increasing our monoclonal antibody therapies to treat and prevent severe illness from COVID. So we currently have clinics providing these treatments to eligible patients in all the communities that we serve. We've provided more than 8,300 infusions just in a handful of months, and we're reaching these patients quickly because if you get the antibodies within 2 to 3 days of symptoms, it really has a very strong impact. So there's an average of only 2 days from the time a person gets a positive COVID test to the infusion. So we feel encouraged by that because this is a life-saving treatment. We're seeing really positive outcomes with only 2% of the patients who received the antibody treatment being admitted to the hospital versus the data for people who did not receive the treatment would be more like a little bit over than 10%. So we see that it works and we're encouraged by that. And we're encouraged by the arrival of oral antivirals, as you saw in the news today, and that shows some promise as well. So we're moving our vaccinations, our testing services more into our primary care clinics. And that helps us because so many of our community members were seeking those kinds of services from our emergency departments, and that was then making it difficult to care for the emergencies. We are also working really creatively with technology to serve patients in their homes. Through our UNC Health Alliance team, we conduct outreach to chronically ill patients across our health system, and over the last few months, we've made outreach to nearly 8,000 chronically ill patients to offer support, to answer questions, and to do everything we can with that wraparound care to help them remain in their homes and not need to be in the hospital. And along that same lines, we've launched an advanced care at home program, which went live in August. And this advanced care at home is like a hospital at home where it admits, tracks, cares for patients, including COVID patients, in their own homes to keep people in a place where they can heal most comfortably and also keep people out of our hospitals. We're also focusing on supporting our teammates. I talked about that a little bit with the burnout and the trauma that our teammates are experiencing. We've been able to commit an additional $300,000 to expand our well-being program, which is something that started in the School of Medicine and taking care of our own to provide mental health and support resources. But now we're able to expand that throughout the health system to reach our teammates in most distress. And then we're also focused on being a source of truth. We're working to be that trusted source of information for the public, to use traditional media, to use social media, to be sure that we are getting the most current information that's accurate information out to our community members. So on most days, if you turn on the news or open the paper, you probably see one of our Carolina faculty members, our expert faculty members, sharing that latest knowledge on variants and vaccines and CDC guidance and the like. So we take that role of the state's health system very seriously and really want to be that trusted source of information from the public, as I know you all do as part of the Carolina community. So a lot of people ask us, what can you do? And I also see that we have questions coming for Provost Bluen and the like. But I would say first, thank you for the volunteering, for the outpouring of love and support that we have had from our Carolina community. We are so grateful. And when people ask, well, what can you do now? I say the very thing that I realize I'm preaching to the choir, because most faculty are vaccinated, but the clear answer of what people can do is to get vaccinated if you're not already. And if you are, to continue to encourage those around you, to encourage with compassion, to listen and try to understand where those barriers are so that we can try to bring people along to get the vaccination. We know that this really matters and saves lives. And then just to continue to practice those things that you were already talking about earlier with masks and staying home if you're ill and those sorts of things. I'm going to tell you two quick things to say. In the midst of all the stress and a really hard time in our health systems for our nurses, our respiratory therapists, for all of the people in healthcare, want to just highlight that we're still having a lot of really special things happening. So the first team, would tell a couple stories. The first team that cared for our first COVID patient to receive a lung transplant. So that patient needed a lung transplant after COVID. But once the patient was well enough and the team all gathered outside with the patient and decided to play the game Uno, and they all played together, a whole mix of different teammates with this patient and family. And just the fact that in that they took the time to kind of lighten the mood and have some fun and play a game, like that kind of thing is really, really special. And there was another recent when I heard of a nurse and the heart intensive care unit where a husband did not want to leave his wife, understandably, but was trying to figure out how to stay overnight and how to get food, and could he leave her to go to the cafeteria. And this nurse just asked a few questions. She was getting off shift and she left her shift that night, a long, grueling shift, went to the place that had the kind of food that he mentioned he liked, got him dinner, parked, came all the way back up and delivered him a meal. And it's that kind of Carolina care is what we call it, but it's that kind of human connection, like the real, this is not about politics or disagreements or all the divisiveness around here, but it's about real human connection. And just hearing those stories and focusing our eyes on what really matters is a big part of the way that we're all going to get through this as we care for people compassionately and in an unbiased and in a way that is really focused on what the patients need and what our teammates need to carry forward. So Thank you for all your support. And I see Provost Blue, and you have a question, and I'll give it back to you, Dr. Chapman.
Well, I just had a quick comment, and that's a follow-up to Mimi's question, and that was we had a conversation this morning, and I was informed that the majority of the patients that are in UNC-Chapel Hill's hospital right now are out-of-county people. And so I know that was something that Mimi, you had asked specifically, and that they, I think 95% of them are unvaccinated individuals. I just want to clarify that.
And just doing the math alone, if we have such higher vaccination rates and we know that the people in the hospital are unvaccinated, just doing the math, just doing that alone, you'd know that those are out of county.
Yeah, and that we've been very fortunate that I don't believe that any of our students or faculty have been admitted to the hospital to date this fall.
Yeah, I think that's an important thing to know, because I think we hear what's happening in the hospital and that everybody is stretched, and then you could come to different conclusions if you were assuming that those folks were all local. So, yeah, thank you so much. And thank you for all you're doing. I mean, this is hard work, but I think I appreciate you focusing on the rewarding moments too, where people are going above and beyond because they know that it means something, even if it seems, it's not necessarily the life-saving intervention, but it's the intervention that's going to kind of stay with people. They're going to remember that nurse that did that. So thank you. All right, we are well over time. Thank you all for staying. And Jill, we can adjourn by something. Tell me what we can adjourn by.
Unless there's an objection, we can adjourn by unanimous consent. Does anyone object to adjourning by unanimous consent? You can call us adjourned, Madam Chair.
All right, we are adjourned. See you next month. Feel free to write, call, whatever you need to do. Bye. I'm going to leave.